What's up, motocross action? Today is an exciting day as we get to combine two things that we love, factory bikes and two-strokes. Today we're riding Cooper Webb's factory KTM 300 SX two-stroke that he raced at the Red Bull Straight Rhythm. A decade ago, KTM two-strokes had nothing to brag about. They had decent engines, but their chassis and suspension were way off from Japanese manufacturers. When Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Honda stopped making two-strokes and Yamaha pushed the pause button on research and development, it gave KTM a window of opportunity to develop its two-strokes into winners. A decade later, KTM two-strokes are the most dominant on the track. Sure, the Yamaha YZ125 and YZ250 two-strokes still handle like a dream and offer super smooth power, but they can't touch the sheer output of the KTM power plants. Since the 2019 450 Supercross champion, Cooper Webb is a Red Bull athlete, contractually obligated to race the Red Bull Straight Rhythm, and luckily he had more two-stroke options to choose from than Ken Roczen did. After the Red Bull Straight Rhythm, Webb's mechanic Carlos Rivera serviced the KTM 300 SX and put Cooper's outdoor suspension on it for us before we met him at the track. There were many factory parts in Cooper Webb's KTM 300 SX, and not because KTM makes factory parts specifically for it, but because the factory parts from his KTM 450 SXF bolt right on, as both bikes share the same chassis. We know what you're thinking. KTM doesn't make a 300cc two-stroke motocross model, but they do actually make a 300cc hop-up kit that bolts right onto the 250SX bottom end, which is exactly what Cooper Webb ran. The 300 SX kit comes with everything, including the cylinder, power valve, piston, gaskets, and ECU. As for Webb's 300cc kit, he had a factory map installed in the ECU and the cylinder was all cleaned up. The Mikuni carburetor, which has given us so much grief in the past, was just rejetted and ran to perfection with the 300cc power plant. Everything else in the engine was stock, including the bottom end. Cooper's setup is nothing out of the ordinary, except for maybe his rear brake. It seemed like the brake was tucked under the clutch cover, which was strange, but it actually helped us learn that the Hinson clutch cover was wider, making the brake lever feel non-existent at times. Cooper's clutch and brake levers were factory parts and their position was neutral. Right away, the shift lever felt high. We had it moved down a notch on the spline, but then it was too low and we couldn't get our feet underneath the shifter. KTM told us that it was a stock spline and shifter, and after scratching our head for a minute, we realized that the titanium Nihilo foot pegs were lower than the stock pegs, which made the shifter feel taller than normal. Most people think that the factory pipe and Akrapovic silencer are one-off products, but that isn't so. The pipe is the exact same part that a customer can buy with a different finish from the Austrian factory, and you can buy the same silencer that Cooper's KTM 300 SX used from KTM Power Parts catalog. Normally a KTM 250 SX sag setting is around 105 millimeters, but with Webb's WP cone valve forks and track shock and factory linkage, he ran 96 millimeters of sag. We thought that the bike was going to knife entering the corners and have a stink bug feel in the rear with such a high sag, but we really shouldn't have doubted the factory KTM team. Our perception was that the bike felt high when sitting on it, mostly because we were on our tippy toes to touch the ground, but once we got on the track, the bike felt perfectly balanced front to rear. The stock black 250 SX frame was powder coated orange to match the race frames, and skid plate mounts were welded on to install the plate as well, as they don't come with skid plate mounts on the 252 strokes. Last, but certainly not least, are the awesome throwback Hot Wheel graphics that Decal Works made for Cooper. Decal Works is offering the same graphics to the public, and you can even customize what the logo says inside, just like Cooper Webb's bike. So what was it like to ride Cooper's KTM 300 two-stroke? It was awesome. The basic 300cc power plant tends to have a short window of power in the mid-range and signs off early on top, but Webb's bike offered a metered power band throughout the entire spread. The throttle response was snappy, and test riders realized that the bike had enough power to pull a taller gear through the corners, although that logic isn't really typical on a two-stroke. When we upshifted, the lugging sound of the 300 fooled us, but once we snapped the throttle on, the bike came alive without any clutch work. We were glad that this was the case because in a lower gear, the bike was a lot harder to handle. On the straightaways, the bike pulled hard and had more than enough top end that you didn't need to short shift it like a stock 300cc two-stroke. This was a nice touch because it meant test riders had a choice, not an obligation to shift. Even though this was Webb's outdoor suspension straight off his 450 SXF, we thought it was still going to be stiff. Pushing up and down on the forks, they didn't move much. We were positive that we were in for a rough ride. But once the crust of the travel was broken, the forks were progressive and not super harsh. However, they definitely suited our faster test riders better, and the faster they went, the better the suspension worked. With our slower testers, the bike would skip all over the small chop and under braking and cause a bit of head shake. The shock partnered well with the forks as they were perfectly balanced and didn't have a lot of fore and aft movement, making the ride very consistent and planted. The factory front Brembo brake is less potent than the stock KTM brakes. Test riders really had to pull hard to get the bike to stop. We learned that Cooper uses different brake pads to make the front brake feel more progressive instead of like an on and off switch. The majority of the parts that made a difference are available over the counter. You can get close to the same engine package by slapping on the KTM 300SX big bore kit and sending your ECU to Twisted Development to mellow out the aggressive mid-range and lengthen the top-end pull. Yes, Cooper Webb's bike had a lot of unobtainable parts such as the brakes, suspension, and titanium bits, but he earned his access to the trick stuff. Overall, we had a blast riding Cooper Webb's factory KTM 300SX two-stroke. For more videos like this, check out motocrossactionmag.com and click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Also check out the website to stay up to date on results, news, reviews, and our latest bike tests.